All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let us begin. Let's begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Meir and Rachel Gold, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this month. A member of Yonah, Tzvi, Ben Yosef, Chaim, Elazar, HaKohen. And to thank Noam Leah Efron for dedicating the shiurim and drashos this month in honor of and celebration of the 98th birthday of Noam's grandfather, Yosef Hershel ben Mordechai Halevi, who I have been informed is actually his birthday today. So Baruch Hashem, Mazel Tov, and Me'eh ve'esim shanim tovos. And our Daf Yomi, our share sponsors for today, Gregg and Rachel Levitan, for the shloshim of Gregg's mother, Esther Levitan, Esther Bas Hershel. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. With that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, and today is our catch-up day. Today is when we join the rest of the world of Daf Yomi in the regular schedule. So today's daf is Yud Tes, but we are starting on Yud Ches Amud Beis, and we are starting at the end of the first wide line. So if you remember again, yesterday we left off by dissecting the pasuk in Zechariah, where the Navi goes ahead and discusses a number of different fast days. The Tzoma Revi'i, the Tzoma Chamishi. So we're continuing to go through that list. So the Gemara says, Tzoma Shvi'i, what is the seventh fast day? Now second wide line. Zeg Gimel B'Tishrei. This refers to the third of Tishrei. Shebo Nerag Bo Gedalia Ben Achikam. What we call Tzom Gedalia. Tzom Gedalia. What happened on the third of Tishrei? Gedalia ben Achikam was assassinated. Umi Hargu, who killed Gedalia ben Achikam? A man by the name of Yishmael ben Nisanya, another Jew. Remember the name of Yishmael ben Nisanya assassinated Gedalia ben Achikam. Now also, just to understand, Gedalia ben Achikam, this is right after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. So Gedalia ben Achikam was a governor who was installed by Nebuchadnezzar, representing some level of Jewish autonomy. With the assassination of Gedalia ben Achikam, the Jewish situation becomes much more compromised. So therefore, again, they instituted a fast day, the third of Tishrei. L'amdecha, and it teaches us an important lesson. Sheshkula misasan shel tzadikim kisreifas beis Elokeinu. Now, what's interesting about this is, as we're going to see, we've already seen, that ultimately, again, there's a fast of Tisha B'Av, right? Destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and the fast of Tzom Gedalia, the assassination of a tzaddik. To which the Gemara tells us that we see from here that the loss of tzaddikim is as traumatic as the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. A very profound statement. V'amai karei shvi. So we'll say, why are we calling Gimel B'Tishrei the seventh fast day? Shvi'i lechadashim. Because we'll say, once again, what we begin to see is in this pasuk, the way we're tracking time is how? From Chodesh Nisan. From Chodesh Nisan. So Tishrei is the seventh month from Chodesh Nisan. Tzoma Asiri, what's the 10th fast? Za'asara B'Teves. This refers to the 10th of Teves. Shebo Samach Melech Bavel Al Yerushalayim. So this is when Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Yerushalayim. Shnei Amar, Vayhi Devar Hashem Elai B'Shana HaTishiyas, B'Chodesh HaAsiri B'Asar L'Chodesh Lemor, Ben Adam, Ksav L'cha Hashem HaYom Hazeh, Es Etzam Yom Hazeh, who samach melech Bavel el Yerushalayim. So also here we have, an explicit pasuk which indicates to us that Yerushalayim is besieged on the 10th of Teves. So once again, va'amai karei asiri. Why are you calling Teves the 10th month? Asiri lechadashim. Once again, we see this theme that halacha l'maisa, these months are being reckoned according to Nisan. So the Gemara says, "V'halo hayarayze lichtov rishon." So I'll say, here's what's interesting in all of this. If you notice, by the way, the Tzom HaAsiri, right? So the 10th fast is Asara B'Teves. Even though, technically speaking, Asara B'Teves is actually the first event that occurred chronologically, right? If you think about this, these dates are all out of chronological order. So why are they recorded the way that they're recorded in the pasuk? Because the Navi chooses to record, is very interesting, the Navi chooses to record the fast days in accordance with what we'll call calendrical chronological order, even though that's different than historical chronological order. So that's how the Navi chooses. So everything is being tracked from Nisan, and we choose to record the events in accordance to how they happen from Nisan. Va'ani in Yomer Kain. But he said, I hold a little bit differently. I hold a little bit differently. Rabbi Shimon, I hold a little bit differently. Ella tzom ha'asiri. See, he has a different way of dashing the pasuk. What's tzom ha'asiri? What's the 10th fast day? Zeh chamisha b'teves. This ultimately again refers to the 5th of Teves. Now, what happened on the 5th of Teves? Because remember again, all the pasuk says is the 10th fast day. So we know we're tracking time from Nisan. So therefore, I know that the 10th month from Nisan is going to be Teves. I know that. But interestingly, Rabbi Shimon says it doesn't refer to the 10th of Teves. It refers to the 5th of Teves. What happened on the 5th of Teves? This is incredible. Shebo basa shmua legola shehuk sa'ir. Apparently on the 5th of Teves, the diaspora communities got word that Yerushalayim had fallen. Shene Emar, Baihi b'shtei asar shana, ba'asiri b'chamisha l'chodesh l'galosenu, ba ilaya apolit mishayim memor, huk sa'ir, va'asu yom shmua ki yom sreifa. And the day that they heard that Yerushalayim had fallen, they made that day into a fast day, just like the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. V'nirin dvarai midvarav. Rabbi Shimon says, I think my approach is better than Rabbi Akiva. Why? Shani Omer al Rishon Rishon v'al Achron Achron. Because according to me, Rabbi Shimon says the pasuk follows historical chronological order. V'hu Omer al Rishon Achron v'al Achron Rishon. Whereas Rabbi Akiva's model, whereas there's calendrical order, or calendrical chronological order, there is no historical chronological order. Okay? Elishu Mona l'Seder Chadashim v'ani Mona l'Seder Paranios. Because Rabbi Akiva felt it's more important than the pasuk to go according to the calendar, or calendrical chronological order based on Nisan being the first month. But I go ahead and feel that it's more important to preserve the historical chronology. Okay, so I will say, see, interestingly enough, they're pretty much agreeing on all the same fast days. The one machlokes seems to be about the fast day in Teves. Now, Rabbi Shimon will agree that there is an Asara b'Teves, right? That there is a fast day of Asara b'Teves. But interestingly enough, he holds that that is not referred to in the pasuk over here. He holds that the fast day of Teves is actually another fast day, that the truth is until we learned Rosh Hashana Yud Chesed Beis, we never knew existed, which is a fast day of Hei b'Teves. Hei b'Teves. And the fast day of Hei b'Teves is the day when we found out that Yerushalayim had fallen. Incredible. Itmar. So we'll say, now that we're talking about fast days, this leads me to another question. Itmar, Rav of Rabbi Chanina, Amri, they both said, Batla Megillas Tainis. So we'll say, what's Megillas Tainis? Take a look at Rashi. Batla Megillas Tainis. This is incredible. Yomim Tovim Shekavu Chachamim Ayidei Nisim She'iru Bahem Va'asru B'Tainis. So we'll say, Megillas Tainis, it's different. When you hear the word Megillas, or you hear the name Megillas Tainis, you assume that it is a book filled with fast days, right? So just the opposite. It's a book that's filled with days that you're not allowed to fast. Why are you not allowed to fast? Because miracles occurred on these days. Some type of miraculous activity. Yomim Tovim Shekavu Chachamim. Megillas Tainis is filled with what we'll call minor holidays. Minor Yomim Tovim that Chazal established Ayidei Nisim She'iru Bahem. Because of miracles that occurred on these days. Va'asrum B'Tainis. And therefore, again, because these days had a Yom Tov identity, you're not allowed to fast on them. The Yeshman Af Behesped, the Kasum Megillah Achos, Olin Yomin Delovis Anabahon. Achshav Shechar Sabosai. So now listen to this. So Megillas Tainis was a book of days, minor Yomim Tovim, which were recorded ultimately again because of small miracles that had occurred on those days, and you're not allowed to fast on it. Shabbosai, such a beautiful idea. Think about this for just a moment. Imagine if you were to compose your own Megillas Tainis, right? Think about it, and you go through life, there are little miracles that occur each and every day. And imagine if a person recorded those miracles in their own Megillas Tainis. Make your own Megillas Tainis. These are the miracles that occurred for me. Wouldn't it be incredible to see what we say in Modim every single day? Va'al nisecha shebechol yom imanu. People have this. Sometimes people keep like a gratitude journal. But the truth is, more than just a gratitude or a hashgacha pratis journal, right? More than just even a gratitude hashgacha pratis, a miracle journal. Because the truth is, maybe not every day, but certainly many days, there are mamish miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for us. Again, like I mentioned before, we said in Modim, V'al nisecha shebechol yom imanu. We thank Hashem for the miracles that He does for us each and every day. So Chazal were acutely aware of this. Now this is obviously talking about more on a national level, but they had this Megillas Tainis. That's Megillas Tainis, a day filled with miraculous events, and on those days we don't fast. So we'll say, so the Shaila is now like this: what happens to Megillas Tainis after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed? Do these days still retain their Yom Tov identity or not? This is a machlokes. Itmar, Rav of Rabbi Chanina, Amri Batli Megillas Tainis. Rav and Rabbi Chanina say that Allah Chalamaysa, now that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so these days are no longer holidays, which I will say effectively means what? Effectively means what? That Allah Chalamaysa, you could fast on these days and you could eulogize on these days. Right? That's what it means. When you say Batla Megillas Tainis, it means that the days no longer have a Yom Tov identity, and therefore you could fast, you could eulogize. So that's Rabbi Mechanina. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yishom, and Lakish. Right? So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lakish say, Lo Batla Megillas Tainis. No, even in the aftermath of the Churban, Megillas Tainis, these days still retain their Yom Tov identities. Rabbi say, by the way, lest you think that you never heard of anything in Megillas Tainis, there are days like Purim and days like Chanukah that are from Megillas Tainis. Remember again, Purim, Chanukah, Purim a little bit different because Purim has a Megillah, right? But even Megillas Esther is after the close of Nevuah. So again, we'll see this inside. So Rav Rabbi Chanina, Amri Batal Megillas Tainis. So also listen to this. So Rav Rabbi Chanina hold that Megillas Tainis is void after the Churban. These days no longer retain their Yom Tov identity. Hachikam, this is what they mean to say. So this is their svara. Bizman sheyesh shalom yulasasur l'simcha. When there is shalom, and ultimately again they are identifying shalom as the presence of the Beis Hamikdash. When there is shalom, these days are for celebration, and therefore you can't fast on them. Ein shalom, tzom. Supposed to, just like we said before. Remember again, remember when we spoke about the fast days espoused in the Navi Zechariah. So remember we had a contradiction. What was the contradiction? The Navi calls it a tzom, the Navi calls it a Yom Moed. So remember again, one of the ways you reconciled this before was saying when there's a Beis Hamikdash, they're fast days. They're not fast days. When there's no Beis Hamikdash, they are fast days. Rav and Rabbi Chanina apply that same model to Megillas Tainis. When there's a Megillas Tainis, when there's a Beis Hamikdash, the days are Yom Tovim. Ultimately, again, when there is no Beis Hamikdash, they're just plain, ordinary days. So the Gemara says as follows: V'hanach na mikiani. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Levi Amar. So what about Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? What do they hold? They hold lo batla Megillas Tainis. They hold no Megillas Tainis was never voided and negated. Why not? So hanihu d'talin rachman of binyan Beis Hamikdash. Aval hanach kidei kaimi. It's only the fast days where the Navi and Zechariah links them to the Beis Hamikdash. But the days in Megillas Tainis, why are they linked to the Beis Hamikdash? In other words, once Chazal established them as what we'll call minor Yomim Tovim, where I just want to point out, the only manifestation of the Yom Tov identity on the days in Megillas Tainis is what? You can't fast. You can't eulogize. It's not like there's anything more dramatic. So Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish will say, the Chazal never made that dependent on the Beis Hamikdash. That was never dependent on the Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, halacha l'maaseh, even in the absence of the Beis Hamikdash, those days will still remain. So I will say this is the fundamental machlokes between Rabbi Chanina on one side, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish on the other side. And after the Churban, do the Yomim Tovim of Megillas Tainis endure or not? See, here we go. Masir Rav Kana raised the kasha. Here we go. Ma'isa v'gazru Tainis b'Chanukah belud. One time, they went ahead and they established a fast day on Chanukah in Lud. Right? As I mentioned before, Chanukah is one of the Yomim Tovim mentioned in Megillas Tainis. So they declared a fast day in Lud. V'yarad Rabbi Elazar v'rachas. So we'll say Rabbi Elazar, in public protestation of the fast day, went to the bathhouse. Publicly entered into the bathhouse. Bathed in private, right? Publicly entered into the bathhouse. To show that halacha l'maaseh, the declaration of the fast was wrong and inappropriate. Rabbi Yeshua siper. Rabbi Yeshua got a haircut. Also, in public defiance of the fast because they felt the declaration of a fast on Chanukah was incorrect. V'amru lahem. and they said to the populace, now you guys have to fast because you fasted. Which means what? You made a mistake by fasting on Hanukkah. You have to fast now to go and atone for your mistake. So I will say, so therefore, what do you see? This was after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, because Rashi says over here, how do we know? V'yard Rabbi Elazar, Yeshua achar churban habayis havu to be Meir Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Rabam charav charabai. So I'll say, this is incredible. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus, who was one of the Talmidim Mufhakim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So already, again, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So this event is occurring after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The populace is making they declared a public fast day during Hanukkah. Because obviously, the people felt that once there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's no Megillas Tainis, therefore Hanukkah is no longer a Yom Tiv. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua said, you're wrong. The Hanukkah is still a Yom Tiv even in the aftermath of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, because Megillas Tainis is still intact. So the Gemara says, this is not really a good proof. I'm Rabbi Yosef, Shiny Chanukah. Chanukah is a little bit different. Right? Chanukah is different than the rest of the Yomim Tovim in Megillas Tainis. Why? Di'ika mitzvah. Ultimately, again, because Rabbi say Chanukah has a mitzvah associated with it. So because it has a mitzvah, it makes sense that even if Megillas Tainis technically was batal, Chanukah would not be batal, because the people got used to performing a mitzvah associated with the end. Amra Abaye, viti batal ihi viti batal mitzvah. So what? If the Yom Tov is batal, the mitzvah could be batal as well. Amra Yosef shiny Chanukah to mefarsem nisa. Chanukah is different. This is always the answer of a Chanukah, right? Chanukah is different. Why? Persume nisa. Persume nisa. Chanukah has an element of publicizing the miracle. So because I look at Rashi, the Mefarsim Nisa, Kivar hu golei l'chol Yisrael ayedei shenagu ba mitzvos v'echziku ba kishal Torah v'no'olachon levatlo. Since Chanukah has such a public performance, right? Because remember again, the way ideally to light Ner Chanukah is to kindle it outdoors. There's Persume Nisa. There's so much publicity associated with Chanukah. It almost becomes, Rashi says, it almost becomes like a mitzvah from the Torah. And therefore, again, it's inappropriate to be mavatal it. So therefore, I will say, here's what we settle on. Chanukah indoors. Okay, so everyone will agree that Chanukah indoors. But just because Chanukah indoors does not automatically mean that what? The rest of Megillas Tainis is intact even after Churban Beis HaMikdash. So let's go weiter. Moshe Rav Acha Bar Huna. So also, this is incredible. Rav Acha Bar Huna raised another kasha. What was his kasha? Bitlasa b'Tishrei batilas ad karta min shtaria. On the 3rd of Tishrei, something interesting happened, that they were successful in negating or taking out the name of God from shtaros. I will say, now what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. Bitlasa b'Tishrei, kach kasav b'Megillah lashon arami, b'telas ad karka bitlu askar shen shayim min ashtaros. So listen, let me give you the back. This is actually a good thing. Listen to the background of this. Here we go. Shegazra malchus yavan gzeira sholahasker shen shema alpiem. The Greek government, the Greek monarchy made a rule. And what was the rule upon the Jewish population? You cannot utter the name of God. You cannot utter the name of your God. That's what they declared. Ukishegavra malchus chashmonai, when the Chashmonaim, the Chashmonaim, overcame the Syrian Greeks, v'nitzchum, hiskinu shiu maskirin shem shemayim afilu b'shtaros. Rabbi said the Chashmonaim, the Greeks, had outlawed the use of the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You were not allowed to say it, not allowed to use it. The Chashmonaim, when they won, instituted something to swing the pendulum in the other direction, which was, you have to use the name of Hashem for everything. Even in what? Even in your documents. Even in your documents. For example, v'kach hayu kosvim b'shnas kach v'kach liyochanan kohen gadol lekel elyon. So also what they would say is, by the way, it's interesting over here that there's a lot of discussion about this, is that they were dating the shtaros in accordance with the reign of the kohen gadol. Which is quite interesting. I'll say, in general, there is a lot of machlokes regarding the Chashmonaim about their monarchy. Because the Chashmonaim were Kohanim, We're Kohanim. Malchus does not come from Shevet Levi, right? Monarchy doesn't come from Levi. Malchus comes from Shevet Yehuda. There's a fundamental machlokes Rambam and Ramban about whether or not the Hashmonaim did the right thing by seizing the monarchy. Again, unfortunately, the Hasmonean monarchy unravels a number of years in, but there's a fundamental machlokes. Did they do the right thing by taking the monarchy? So I don't know if it's just during their reign that they did it according to Yochanan Kohen, whatever it is. The point over here is they instituted even when you go and you date the shtar, you have to date the shtar. This is the following year of the reign of Yochanan Kohen Gadol Lekel Elyon. So that's what they instituted. Now watch this. Ukishamu Chachamim Badavar. When the Chachamim heard about this, so Amru Lamachar, they said this is a terrible idea. Because what's going to happen? Lamachar, tomorrow, Zepore Eschavo, Venimtza Shtar Mutal Ba'ashpa. What's going to happen? It's beautiful. You want to include the name of Hashem, the Kel Elyon in your shtar. What's going to happen? Reuven lends Shimon $1,000. Shimon's going to pay back the $1,000. What happens with the loan document when you pay it back? The borrower gets it back, and what does he do with it? Tears it up. He's going to throw it in the garbage. So the Chachamim say, what did you do? What did you do? So somebody's going to throw out a loan document that has the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what happened? V'nimtza shei mutal ba'ashba ubitlum. And the Chachamim were finally successful in uprooting this Hasmonean decree. Okay? So now I will say, so this is the Hashmonaim having good intentions, wanting to reinstill within the people a reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Chachamim saying, bad idea. And therefore it took them a while to uproot this practice. When they finally uproot this practice, so the Gemara says, "Ubitlum va'osayom asal yomtiv." And they uprooted it. When were they able to uproot it? When were they able to uproot it? Interestingly enough, on the 3rd of Tishrei. On the 3rd of Tishrei, just a number of incredible lessons over here. How sometimes in life, even when we think we have a great idea, it's always good to have someone to bounce your ideas off of, right? Because even something that sounds great and sounds holy and sounds wonderful to me, to be able to bounce something off someone whose opinion I respect, maybe with a little bit more life wisdom than I have, is always an incredible thing. Because sometimes even things that come from the purest of motivations are just not the best of ideas. That's Aleph. Beis, what do you see? You see that even in the world of Ruchnius, moderation is incredibly important. Right? The key to success in life, even in spirituality, is moderation. That if you try to go too far, try to do too much, too quickly, you end up making mistakes. The Hashmonaim are desperate to bring God back into daily life. So they jump. And what do? They bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu everywhere, even in shtaris. Beautiful intention, but wrong. When you try to do too much, too fast, too quickly, even in Ruchnius, it backfires. But the Rebbe brings down, he says, this is why Yaakov Avinu, when he has his dream about Sula Musav Artzav Rosh Magia Shamayma, his first interaction with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a ladder. Hey, it's a famous vart. Why a ladder? Because the only way to scale a ladder is one rung at a time. In Ruchnius, if we want to really be successful, you don't go from 0 to 60 in under, I don't know what is fast considered today, whatever. In under, a minute, whatever, 6 seconds, whatever it is, right? You can't go ahead. I drive a Toyota, okay? Right? So ultimately, you can't do that. It's one rung at a time. One rung at a time, and that ultimately, again, is how you're successful. An incredible Moser. So the Gemara says, 1 second. So I'm going to say, if you hold that Megillas Tainis was batal, kamaisa bitol, achranaisa mosifin. So says, remember again, if you hold that Megillas Tainis is batal, right? If all Megillas Tainis is batal, so then why would the rabbis be adding on additional Yom Tovim, right? So now remember again, they're adding on an additional Yom Tov now on the 3rd of Tishrei. Now granted, interesting enough, the 3rd of Tishrei is already a fast day, but again, that kind of makes sense because halacha lamaisa, fast day Gedalia ben Achikam, so Gedalia was batal, this is during times the second Beis HaMikdash. Right, so remember again, if you assume that Megillas Tainis was batal already after the first Beis HaMikdash, so why are they adding on new days? To which the Gemara says, no. This is the answer. No. Remember the story. The Beis HaMikdash is standing. This is when the Chashmonaim conquered the Syrian Greeks. This is Bisman Bayesheni. The Beis HaMikdash is still standing for another couple of hundred years after this. So top of your test, but 1 second. The Seifuk lay. The Hava lay Yom Shenerak Bo Gedai Ben Achikam. Whoa. So if the Beis Hamikdash is still standing and Megillas Tainis is still in effect, that means the fact. So look at Rashi. V'seifok I Beis Hamikdash havakayim belav hagi aviyamtiv dahinut som gidalya v'karach manabos. So now listen to this. Watch this. So you're telling me no. Megillas Tainis for sure is intact, and they could even add on additional days because the Beis Hamikdash is standing. Whoa! If the Beis Hamikdash is standing, Rabosai, what happens to the fast days mentioned in the Navi Zechariah? What happens to the fast days mentioned? They don't fast. They're Yamim Tovim. If that's the case, Gimel Tishrei, which was Tzom Gedalia, is what? Already a Yom Tiv. It's already a Yom Tiv. So if it's already a Yom Tiv, why do you have to make it into another Yom Tiv? It's the days that the Chachamim were able to stop people from putting Shem Hashem in their shtar. Right? So ultimately, it's already a Yom Tiv because it's not Tzom Gedalia. In other words, I just want to point out, when the Beis Hamikdash stands, it's not just the pshat that the fast days aren't fast days. Remember again, what does the Navi say? It's a moed. It becomes a Yom Tiv. So it's not just that I don't fast, it's that it's transformed into a Yom Tiv, which means I'm not allowed to fast. So if that's the case, that some Gida is already a Yom Tiv, what are Chazal being Mosif? To which the Gemara says, Amarav lo nitzrucha Elazar es shalafanov. Now, says, it's very interesting. Look at Rashi lo nitzrucha. Hadar kavod b'megillas tainis al davar zeh ela le'esar esmo kam hu b'tainis kidamin lekamei. Both listen to this. This is fascinating. The days of Megillas Tainis are days in which minor miracles occur. And therefore, Chazal decreed that those days should be treated like Yom Tiv. But in order to go ahead and concretize and solidify their Yom Tiv identity, they also decreed that you can't fast the day before these days as well. Right? So for example, right? So let's say they decide that the 22nd of Cheshvan is a Yom Tiv. A miracle occurred on the 22nd of Cheshvan. Right? The miracle occurred on the 22nd of Cheshvan. So they include that in Megillas Tainis. Because of that, you're not allowed to fast when? The 21st of Cheshvan as well. So this is so fascinating. So the Gemara says like this. When the Beis Hamikdash stands, so the 3rd of Tishrei, which was what? Tzom Gedalia becomes a Yom Tiv. But it's only that day that becomes a Yom Tiv. But by kind of superimposing another layer of Yom Tiv on top of the 3rd of Tishrei and calling it the day that Chazal were able to uproot the use of Shem Hashem in Shtaros and including that Yom Tiv now in Megillas Tainis, that not only impacts the 3rd of Tishrei, what else does it impact? The 2nd of Tishrei. Now you can't fast on the 2nd of Tishrei as well. So the Gemara says, Lo Yitzchok Elazar shalafonav nami teipok. 1 second. You still can't fast on the 2nd of Tishrei. Why not? Now for us, it's Rosh Hashana. But remember again, in a pure model, so the 2nd of Tishrei is not Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana is only when? The 1st of Tishrei. Right? So just let's operate with that model right now. So which the Gemara says, but you still can't fast on the 2nd of Tishrei. And I'll tell you why. Because ultimately again, the 2nd of Tishrei is the day after Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is also a Yom Tiv, interestingly enough, is also a Yom Tiv. And therefore, again, you can't fast on the day after Rosh Chodesh. Anyway, so we'll say, so in other words, if you're going to tell me you want to infuse the 3rd of Tishrei with a Megillas Tainis sanctity so that it impacts the 2nd of Tishrei, the 2nd of Tishrei is already blanketed by a quasi-Yom Tov status because it's the day after the 1st of Tishrei, right, which is Rosh Chodesh. To which the Gemara says, no. Rosh Chodesh d'oraisa. The boss said, this is actually quite amazing. Rosh Chodesh has a Yom Tov status d'oraisa. U'de'oraisa lo boi chizuk. I will say, watch this. So I will say, we're going to see now. Well, let's see. De'oraisa does not need any bolstering. What does this mean? Desanya, here we go. Hayomim ha'ela ksuv Megillas Tainis. Any day that is written in Megillas Tainis, which I will say, so remember again, the days in Megillas Tainis are days in which minor miracles occurred, or major miracles occurred. So asurim bein lifnei bein lacharayv. So we'll say, listen to this. Any day that's in Megillas Tainis are recorded as a Yom Tiv, and therefore, again, remember, what's the impact of being a Yom Tiv in Megillas Tainis? What's the impact? You can't fast, you can't deliver eulogies. Not only that, asurin bein lifneihem bein lachareihem. Both the day before the quote-unquote Yom Tiv and the day after the Yom Tiv is also asur in Hesped and Tainis. You can't eulogize and you can't fast. Shabbosos Yamim Tovim, Shabbos, I will say, and we're going to see what's the reason for that. Well, actually, let's see. Shabbosos Yamim Tovim, but on Shabbos and Yom Tov, so the Gemara says, Hey Masur, remember, you also can't fast or eulogize on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Hey Masurin, but it's only Shabbos and Yom Tov that are aser. Lifneim lachareim mutarin, but ultimately before Shabbos or after Shabbos or before Yom Tov, after Yom Tov, you're allowed to fast, you're allowed to eulogize. Ma hefresh bein zelazeh. So we'll say, why is that? Why is that on a Megillas Tainis Yom Tov, so essentially the Yom Tov identity extends to the day before, the day after, but on Stam Shabbos, the truth is there's no such thing as Stam Shabbos. Right? On a Yom Tov, right, that the sanctity does not go and extend before and after, to which the Gemara says very simply, Halalu divrei Torah, ve'in divrei Torah tzrichin chizuk. Halalu divrei sofrim, ve'divrei sofrim tzrichin chizuk. Right, so it's such a beautiful statement, because the oraisas do not require any level of chizuk, don't require bolstering. Why? Because people treat them already with a sense of reverence. But the Rabbanon's rabbinic legislation, people don't always treat with a sense of reverence, and therefore they require chizuk. So I will say, this is incredible. So you see what's happening over here? So the same halachas apply to the Yomim Tovim in Megillas Tainis and to a Shabbos and Yom Tov. You can't fast, you can't eulogize. Interesting enough, in Megillas Tainis, that's we'll call it that sanctity, devolves upon the day before and the day after as well. Why? In order to go ahead and solidify the sanctity of the Yom Tov in Megillas Tainis itself. Which I will say something really incredible, which teaches us that sometimes in order to go ahead and solidify and concretize sanctity, you have to create the buffer before and the buffer after. We've learned this many times, that Kedusha comes from the creation of Gidarim. Holiness comes from the creation of boundaries. If I live life on the line between mutter and aser, tamei and tar, inevitably I'm going to fall on the wrong side of that. If I want to preserve the kedusha of my life, there has to be kedusha lifneihem ula achareihem. There has to be a buffer of holiness surrounding me, so that if I do mess up, I only venture into the buffer and not into the world of the illegal and illicit. Such an incredible yisod. So I'll say, so therefore again, we're still facing the same question. So exciting. We're still facing the same question, which is, so now you're telling me Chazal added an additional Yom Tov dimension onto the 3rd of Tishrei. Now the 3rd of Tishrei, if it's during the times of the Beis HaMikdash, already has a Yom Tov identity, and that's what? Is that it's the unfast day. The unfast day, right? In other words, it was Tom Gedalia, Beis HaMikdash is standing, and now ultimately again, it's Yom Tov. It's Yom Tov. To which the Gemara says, so what do you accomplish by making a new Yom Tov? We want the Yom Tov identity to devolve on the 2nd of Tishrei, and on the 4th of Tishrei as well. So the Gemara first didn't like that, because 2nd of Tishrei is already Kaddish, because it's the day after Rosh Chodesh. To which we see from here that no, the only time that the sanctity of the day kind of goes backwards and forwards is only on rabbinic days, not on biblical days. Because rabbinic days, you need that in order to safeguard the sanctity of the day. In other words, divrei sofrim tzrichin chizuk, divrei Torah ein tzrichin chizuk. And I both say, probably like an incredible musar for us also. It's probably true, I think it's, I'm going to speak for myself, I often find this to be true, that the oraisas are not usually the things that we struggle with. Right? Most of us, I would assume, we're pretty good with the oraisas, the biblical laws. It's the dirabanans that often are challenging. Now, often because they're very specific, often because sometimes it's legislation that we don't necessarily understand, or we don't necessarily appreciate the reasoning for. So this is not just like a statement in the formulation of halacha. It's an incredible yisod in our lives as well. Divrei Torah in tzrichin chizuk. I'm pretty good on the daraisas. Divrei soul from tzrichin chizuk, but we can all use chizuk in the dirabanans. V'seifuk lei dahavi le'yom shlif ne'yom shenerag bo gidai ben achikam. But ultimately, again, go ahead and learn it out from the fact, shouldn't it be sanctified because it's the day before Gedalia ben Achikam was assassinated? Amrabashi, Gedalia ben Achikam divrei Kabbalahu. So we'll say, so remember again, what is that day? The Yom Tov should be an extra Yom Tov because it's the day that Gedalia ben Achikam was assassinated. No, what it's saying is, now that the Beis HaMikdash is standing, and that day ultimately is a Yom Tov, and that day is a Yom Tov, so therefore, again, that Yom Tov sanctity should devolve upon the 2nd of Tishrei as well. So once again, the Gemara says, Amravashi Gidai ben Achikam divrei Kabbalahu. I want to point out the story of Gidai ben Achikam is recorded in the Navi Zechariah. So because it's in the Navi, divrei Kabbalah, it's like a daraisa. For divrei Kabbalah, in other words, once it's in Tanakh, ultimately, again, it has to a certain degree like a biblical status. Quite incredible. Master Rav Tuvi Bar Masna. So we'll say, so now we're still in our basic fundamental issue, which is, does Megillas Tainis, is it still in effect? Right? Is it still in effect in the aftermath of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Or do we say that once the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, the Yomim Tovim of Megillas Tainis pretty much cease to exist? So here we go. Master Rav Tuvi Bar Masna. This is incredible. So listen to this. Be'esim v'tamniya Bey. On the 28th, this is talking about the 28th of Adar, as we're going to see. This is a quote. This is a quotation from Megillas Tainis. So we'll say, yeah, okay. This is a quotation from Megillas. So much ado. So on the 28th of Adar, Asa Besurta Tavsa Liyudai, a news, right? Besurta Tavsa came out to the Jews. Delo Yeidun Ma'oraisa. So what it says, we're going to see on the 28th of Adar, literally it says that a good news came out for the Jews that they don't have to separate from Torah. They don't have to separate from Torah. But say, listen to this. Shegazra Hamalchus Gzer. Now, what is that? First of all, what a strange Yom Tiv. Right? On the 28th of Adar, we celebrate that we don't have to separate from Torah. Okay, so what does that mean? What's an incredible story? Shegazra Malchus Hamalchus Gezerah Shalo Yask B'Torah. The Roman Malchus, Rome, decreed that the Jewish people should not be able to learn Torah. V'Shalo, we'll say, I just want to point out, we're not strangers to this, right? Throughout the ages, we've seen Gezeras like this, that you're not allowed to learn Torah. We'll say, can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? How fortunate we are. Every single day we start our day with a Blat Gemara. Right? It's such an integral part of our lives. Can you imagine a gezerah that says you're not allowed to learn Torah? I think it's only once a person is really enmeshed in Torah, like Baruch Hashem, we all are, that you begin to realize what that means. That's like someone depriving you of oxygen. That's like someone depriving you of food and water. That's like someone taking a limb from your body. Right? That's what these gezeras mean. So the Rome had decreed that the Jews can't learn Torah. Furthermore, shall I ask the Torah? They also decreed on Milah, and you can't keep Shabbos. So they decreed, right? No Torah, no Milah, no Shabbos. What did Yehuda ben Shammua and his friends do? Listen to this. So halchu v'natlo eitza mimatronisa achos. They went and they went to a certain matronisa. Usually means a noblewoman. Matronisa achos shekol gidole romi mitsuyin etzla. They went to a noblewoman who all of the noblemen of Rome frequented. I'm sure it was for her advice, right? So they went, right? They frequented. And what happened? Amar lahem. So she said to them, she did give them good advice. She said to them, Bo v'havginu balayla. Oh, so listen to what she says to them. She says to them, make a hafgana. Make a hafgana. Go ahead and you have to make a rally. You have to make a rally, right? You have to make a public protest. Hochu v'havginu balayla. So they made a protest that night. Amru, ishamayim. So they cried out and they were saying this to the Romans. They were saying, by God, like the Manach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for God's sake, lo acheichem anachnu. Listen to what they're saying to the Romans. Are we not your brothers? Are we not your brothers? V'lo b'nei av echad anachnu. Are we not all the sons of the same father? Right? Yeah, remember, Rome comes from Esav. We come from Yaakov. Ultimately, again, we have the same father, Yitzchok. Do we not all come from the same father? V'lo b'nei emachos anachnu. Are we not all from the same mother? From Rivka Imenu. Man nishtanenu mikol umo v'lashon shatem golzon leinu gzeras kashos. Why do you choose us? Why do you single us out, Rome, from all the other nations and impose upon us such harsh decrees? So the Gemara says, ubitlum. And ultimately, again, so what happened? It worked, right? And Rome negated the decrees. And that day they made it on both sides. So it's interesting, by the way. When did they make the hafgana, right? When did they make the protest? At night. Because there is no greater way to get people to do what you want them to do than sleep deprivation, right? At the end of the day, become a thorn on the side of both sides. This Gemara is a very powerful idea, which is that, sometimes we think that the job of the Jew is to be docile. And the job of the Jew is not to cause too many waves. But the truth is, when we are, especially when we are in diaspora, there is a very careful balance that we have to have. But the Jew also has to know how to stand up, when to stand up, and how to be assertive. And not to take every single thing lying down. And that comes in a variety of different ways. Obviously part of, I always feel that today when you look at Eretz Yisrael, part of the Oz, right, and part of the Ga'ava Atzma'it is the ability to have a Jewish army, right, is the ability for Jews to finally defend themselves and stand up for themselves, and for the world to recognize that Jews have power, which is an incredible yesod. But I would also say, even here in diaspora, the need to get involved in advocacy is incredibly important. This is not a plug for APAC, but if it was a plug for APAC, you have to get involved. You have to get involved in advocacy, and you have to get involved in helping to shape policy, because things don't just happen by themselves. A Jew has to stand up for what is right, and to live my life and only focus on myself and not worrying about what's going on in the world around me is a shirking of our responsibilities. There's a time for Hafgana. I'm not saying burning tires. I don't think burning tires is ever a good idea, right? But Lamaisa, and I think, by the way, I just want to go on record as saying the Hafganot, right, that you often see in Eretz Yisrael are nothing short of a Chilul Hashem. Especially, again, when it comes to abusing Jewish police officers, calling people names, and the truth is, protesting over things that are not really protests. But that's a different discussion. But it's such an incredible yesod in terms of sometimes you can't just accept the gzeira. Sometimes you have to stand up, be counted, and do something. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "V'isal adayt chabatla megillas tainis." Kamaisa bito. So the Gemara says, "V'isal adayt chabatla megillas tainis." Kamaisa batla achranaisa mosifin. So we'll say here they made another Yom Tiv, 28th of Adar, another Yom Tiv. Now 1 second. If you're going to tell me that megillas tainis is batal, so then if those Yom Tov they're making new Yom Tovim, so we'll say this is incredible. V'chitema hachanayim b'zman shveis mikdash Chaim. Well, maybe this event also occurred when the Beis Hamikdash was standing. To which the Gemara says, no. Vaha Yehuda ben Shamua, Talmudosh Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir Basar Hachi Hava. We both say no, because who is the person, who is the main character in the story? Yehuda ben Shamua. We both say, one of the lost things we don't have in learning Gemara, and I would venture to say none of us got it in our, even if you had a yeshiva upbringing, is the actual history of Tanam and Amoraim. When did everyone live? And what's the shalshelas? Maybe we'll start another shir just on that, because it's, first of all, it's fascinating, and it's also so important to understanding Gemara. So the Gemara says, who is Yehuda ben Shamua? Yehuda ben Shamua is a Talmud of Rabbi Meir. And ultimately we'll say, who is Rabbi Meir's Rebbe? Who's Rabbi Meir's? Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva lives in the aftermath of the Churban, which means by the time we get to Yehuda ben Shamua, right, already again, no longer a Beis Hamikdash. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Yehuda ben Shamua, Rabbi Meir. Sorry, Meir Basar Churban Hava Kamadoros. So Meir already lived a couple of generations after the Churban. Rashi says, Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Charav Abayis, Rabbi Eliezer Talmido Haya, Rabbi Akiva Talmido Shol Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Meir Talmido Rabbi Akiva. So both says here have the Shalshal is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right, was the Rabbi. His Talmud was Rabbi Eliezer. His Talmud was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's Talmud was Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir's Talmud was Yehuda ben Shamua. So already you're a couple of generations removed from the Beis HaMikdash. So here you have it. They're making new Yamim Tovim after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Which must mean that what? That Allah L'maisa Megillas Tainis was in existence even after the Churban. Because if Megillas Tainis was void, it wouldn't make sense that they're making new Yamim Tovim once Megillas Tainis was void. So it must be Megillas Tainis is in effect even after the Churban. The Gemara just proves, by the way, that Yehuda ben Shamua, the Gemara says, this nan, interesting halacha over here. This is just proving just the chronology that we just said before. So we'll say if you have a glass utensil that ultimately became tameh, then you punctured a hole in it. And then what happens? You filled it with lead. Someone is shipping on the Yehuda ben Shamua Matame Mishra Meir. Yehuda ben Shamua says it's tameh. Then I will say we're not going to get into the intricacies of this halacha, but bottom line, what this comes down to is as follows: when you have a glass utensil and it's unfit, and then you fill it with metal, and now it becomes fit for use. What is the status of that utensil? Is that a glass utensil or is that a metal utensil? And I will say the nafkamina will be as follows: if the utensil was tameh, then you made it unfit for use, it's tar. Now you make it refit for use. If it's a metal utensil, it regains its former tumah. If it's a glass utensil, it does not. So what happens when you take a glass utensil and you plug it with metal? So Yehuda ben Shamua, in the name of Rabbi Meir, says that it's tameh. Amid beis. The Chachamim say ultimately again it is tahar. Because they will say ultimately again what happens over here is that Rabbi Yehuda ben Shamua says since it is filled with metal and metal allows it to exist as a utensil, it is considered to be a metal utensil. It's what we go basar hamaymid. We go after the item which allows the utensil to be usable. The Chachamim say no, it still has the status of glass. We'll say the only reason the Gemara brought that down was why? To show that Yehuda ben Shemua is a Talmud of who? Rabbi Meir, who was a Talmud ultimately again of Rabbi Akiva, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Elazar, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, to once again show that Megillas Tainus is alive and well even after the Churban. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Tanoihi. In reality, this whole thing is a machlokes tanoim. This sanya, listen to this. Hayomim ha'ilu aksuvim Megillas Tainus, bein bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim, bein bizman she'ein beis hamikdash kayim, asur de Rabbi Meir. Here you have it. Rabbi Meir holds that Allah Lamaisa, the days of Megillas Tainus, the Yom Tov Megillas Tainus, are considered to be Yomim Tovim, both when the Beis Hamikdash stands and when it does not. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Bizman sheBeis Hamikdash Chaim, Asur mipnei shesimcha hi lahem, Ein Beis Hamikdash Chaim, Mutarin mipnei she'evel hi lahem. So ultimately, again, Rabbi Yossi says, no, the days of Megillas Tainus are only Yomim Tovim when the Beis Hamikdash stands. But when the Beis Hamikdash is not standing, Rabbi says, this is very interesting, they're mutter. Rabbi say, mutter in what? Hesped and Tainus. Okay, so I just want to point out, it's interesting over here. They're not Yomim Tovim anymore. So Rabbi say, so this is the fundamental machlokes. Here you have it. Machlokes Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Meir says, Megillas Tainus, those days are still Yomim Tovim, even in the aftermath of the Churban. And Rabbi Yossi holds that halacha l'maisa, only when the Beis Hamikdash stands are they Yomim Tovim. No Beis Hamikdash, they're not Yomim Tovim. The Hilchasa, I will say, what is the halacha? Batlu. The halacha is the halacha l'maisa. Once the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, the Yomim Tovim in Megillas Tainus are no longer Yomim Tovim. Oh, we're not finished. The Hilchasa, lo batlu. And the halacha l'maisa is Megillas Tainus is alive and well, it's not batal. Okay? So the Gemara says, Kashi Hilchasa. What do we do with that? What exactly, how do we reconcile that? So I'll say this is incredible. Lo Kashya, here we go. Ha bechanaka upurim kan bishar yomi. I will say here you have it. Quite incredible. So I will say this is the entire discussion that comes to a conclusion. In reality, really we paskin. It appears that we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, that once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Yomim Tovim of Megillas Tainus were batal as well. So I will say, with two exceptions. What are the two exceptions? Chanukah and Purim. Why Chanukah and Purim? Why are they the exceptions? So it goes back to what the Gemara said before. Because both of those days have Pirsumei Nisa. There's a publicity associated with it, and there are mitzvos that are associated with those days. Those days have taken on a quasi d'oraisa status. And because of that, even though, again, their genesis was Megillas Tainus, because of the publicity, because of the mitzvah, they have become so ingrained like a d'oraisa, and therefore halacha l'maisa, they are not batal. And I will say, there's something very beautiful in this as well. What's the connection between the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and the negation of Megillas Tainus? In other words, why? Why would... So we'll say, remember, Megillas Tainus is filled with what kind of days? Right? Days on which miracles occurred. But I will say, what kind of miracles? You see, it's not the supernatural miracles, right? That's not what it is, right? It's the everyday miracles, right? It's the kind of stuff, like, here's a perfect example, right? The 28th of Adar is a Yom Tov. Why? Because halacha l'maisa, they negated a decree. Now again, could you say that was maybe Yehuda ben Shamuel was very persuasive? They spoke to the Matronisa. The Matronisa spoke to someone. Whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff. that occurred, right? Chazal were able to go ahead and stop people from using the Shem Hashem on the 3rd of Tishrei. In their letters. These are not supernatural miracles. These are what we call the natural miracles of everyday life. So saying the beauty of the Beis Hamikdash and the power of the Beis Hamikdash was that it created a tangible presence of God in everyday life. That was the power of the Mikdash. It's not the pshat that it was the most beautiful building. You can build beautiful buildings anywhere. Pshat tov mislachas, we will be zocha. Right? So it's not the pshat that's big. It's not even the pshat that there's karbanos. The power of the Beis HaMikdash was that it brought the Ribono Shel Olam into everyday life. There was a divine abode in this world. And when that happens, there is a divine tangibility, kiviyachol. There is a divine awareness. And that divine awareness allows you to see the miracles of everyday life in a much more acute fashion. I will say, what's the greatest spiritual struggle we have each and every day? It's seeing Hashem in everyday life. Shivisi Hashem lenegdi sam. That's how the Shulchan Aruch works. It starts, I place God before me at all times. The goal in life, Balatanya writes, is to live God with constant and perpetual God awareness. With perpetual God awareness. That's the goal. If you live life with God awareness, I see Hashem, I feel Hashem, anywhere and everywhere, that shapes the way I live. It shapes the way I talk. It shapes everything that I do. That was the power of the Beis HaMikdash. It brought a God awareness to this world. And what do we mourn in the absence of the Beis HaMikdash? Not a building. Buildings come and go. What we mourn in the absence of the Beis HaMikdash is the lack of that acute God awareness. And therefore, again, the Gemara says, with the lapse in that God awareness, Batla Megillas Tainis, all those days that were celebrations of the nuanced miracles of life, those days cease as well. And we'll say, you know why we daven for a Beis HaMikdash? Because I want to feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu anywhere and everywhere. That's what I want. I want a life of Shivisi Hashem lenegdi summit. That's what I want more than anything. So I daven every day for a Beis HaMikdash because I want humanity to feel the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu each and every day. Halavai we should be zocha Meir Rabbi Yameinu. We'll say, let's go weiter. Almost there. We'll say, bringing it back to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah said, topic of the Mishnah is when they send out messengers to the outlying communities to announce the arrival of Rosh Chodesh. So remember again, they say we go out on Elul because of Rosh Hashana, and on Tishrei, they go again on Tishrei, ultimately again to make sure the Yomim Tovim are on the right dates. But 1 second. Once the witnesses, right, or once the shluchim went out to declare when Elul was, why do you have to go about on Tishrei? Now, boss, remember again, why is it enough to go Elul? Because Elul was always how long? 29 days. Now, again, since the time of Ezra, Elul was 29 days. So why do you have to go out again on Tishrei? Well, maybe there's the possibility that they'll go ahead and make Elul a 30-day month instead of a 29-day month. From the days of Ezra and on, we have not seen that Elul has ever been a 30-day month. So the Gemara says, Lo matzinu delo itzterich. It never happened because they didn't need to do it. Ha itzterich ma'abrin alei. But if we needed to do it, we would do it. I will say, now, interestingly enough, what would be the reason to make Elul a 30-day month instead of a 29-day month? So this is incredible. If you look at Rashi says, Ha'itzterich, we'll actually see this in tomorrow's daf, imishum yarka, imishum masya. I will say, listen to this. What Chazal tried to avoid is Shabbos and Yom Tov going into each other. Why? Because I will say, interesting enough, you see, why? Because you would have a problem. If somebody passed away, let's say you have Shabbos going into Yom Tov, right? So if someone passed away on Shabbos, that means we wouldn't bury them until when? Until potentially, right, Monday, right afterwards, right? Similarly, vegetables, right? If that means you'd have to go ahead and pick all your vegetables prior to the 2-day Kiddusha, because you can't do any of that on Yom Tov itself. So when Chazal saw that there'd be a Shabbos Yom Tov combination, they would sometimes go ahead and add an extra day to Elul. This is fascinating. An extra day to Elul in order to avoid Shabbos and Yom Tov coming on the heels of one another. Quite fascinating. I will say, but what's the net effect of doing that? Hamakalka Rosh Hashana. I will say, do you know what that means? That means that's fine. Anyone who lives in proximity to Yerushalayim, right, from Eretz Yisrael, they can get word that Elul is a 30-day month. I will say, what does it mean for all the far-flung communities? Not even so far-flung. What does it mean? It turns out they're celebrating Rosh Hashanah on the wrong day, right? Because remember, again, they're operating under the assumption that Elul was 29 days, and therefore they will observe Rosh Hashanah on day number 30. Right? Then it turns out they extended Elul an extra day, and it turns out that now Rosh Hashanah got messed up for the outlying communities. To which the Gemara says something amazing. Mutav tikalka Rosh Hashanah, mutav tikalka Rosh Hashanah, v'lo yiskalkalu kolu modos. It is better for Rosh Hashanah to be messed up than what? Than to mess up all the other Yomim Tovim. Namely, Rabbi say, what else? Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Right? Yom Kippur, which Rabbi say is such an incredible Gemara. If we had more time, I'd get into this, because especially given the fact of how we learned how important Rosh Hashanah is. Kol ba'ei olam ovrim lefanav kibnei maran. Right? Everybody passes universal judgment. Yet Chazal made the call that it is better for Rosh Hashanah to be messed up calendrically, to know that Yom Kippur and Sukkot are intact. So therefore, again, therefore they would send out messengers again on Tishrei to announce the arrival of the month of Tishrei in the unusual occurrence that they would make Elul a 30-day month. Now I will say, now again, historically, it rarely happened. But could it happen? Could it happen? Absolutely. So because it could happen, they set in place, shluchim go out for Tishrei as well. Also, you can even say, the Lashon of the Mishnah was that messengers would go out for Tishrei, mipnei takanas hamoados, so that the Yomim Tovim should be properly arranged. Good. Ultimately, again, they go out for Kislev, for Chanukah, right? So people should know when Chanukah is. And on Adar, so people should know when Purim is. And if it's an Uber what happens if it's a leap year? Like this, you have Adar Aleph, Adar Beis. So what do? Yotzin Af al Adar Sheni Mipnei Purim. So we'll say again, if it's a leap year, not only do they go out for Adar Aleph, but they also go out for Adar Beis. Because when is Purim observed? Second Adar. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Yotzin Af al Adar Sheni Purim Lo Katoni. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the Mishnah makes no mention about Adar Sheni. Right? No mention about Adar Sheni. So Masnisin de lo Rebbe. Our Mishnah must not reflect the view of Rebbe. Why not? Disanya Rebbe Omer, Imnis Abra Hashana, Yotzin Af al Adar Hasheni Imnei Purim. So Rebbe holds that in a leap year, messengers would go out for the second Adar as well. Why? Because we'll say Purim is observed in the second Adar. So therefore our Mishnah doesn't mention anything about Adar Sheni. So it must be our Mishnah holds that for Adar Sheni the shluchim don't go out. To which the Gemara says, maybe they're following machlokes. Demar Sabra, one opinion holds, Kol mitzvos hana goes b'sheni, no goes b'rishon. Because we'll say one opinion holds, i.e. the Tana of our Mishnah, that really, technically speaking, if you observed Purim in Adar Rishon, you're Yotzei. Right? Although ideally you do it in Adar Sheni, anything that you do in Adar Sheni, if you ended up doing it in Adar Rishon, you are Yotzei. And therefore, maybe the Tana of our Mishnah doesn't say they go out for Adar Sheni, because what's the worst case scenario? If you observe Purim in Adar Rishon, you're fine. Umar Savar Rebbe, on the other hand, holds, Kol mitzvos hanagos b'sheni ein noagos b'rishon. Rebbe holds, no. When you have a leap year and there's an Adar Sheni, you can't do anything in Adar Rishon. And therefore Rebbe holds, if it was a leap year, they would have to send messengers again in Adar Sheni, because that is the real month, only month, in which you could fulfill the mitzvos of Purim. To which the Gemara says, lo. It's not true. Everyone agrees that Allah Lamaisa, when there's a leap year, you can't perform the mitzvos of Purim in Adar Rishon. Right? Everyone agrees those mitzvos are only performed in Adar Sheni. Everyone agrees. So we'll say, here's what they argue about. Here we go. Disanyo, kama ibor shana. I will say, when we add an extra month, how long is that month? Kaba ibor shana. Right? So Adar Rishon, how long is that? So the Gemara says, Lamed Yom. Tanakama says 30 days. Adar Rishon is always a 30-day month. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer Chodesh. Rav Shimon Gamliel says Chodesh. Now both say we are assuming Chodesh means right now 29 days. We're assuming that's what it means, 29 days. So Maishna Lamed. So ultimately, again, the Gemara says, Diyadi. Ultimately, again, so both say the good news is once they know about the leap year, they automatically know the duration of the leap year, so they know exactly when to go ahead and begin Adar Sheni. Chodesh Nami Yadi. So if that's the case, even if you hold that it's a 29-day, in other words, both say, as long as people always know how long Adar Aleph is, you don't have to what? Send shluchim again for Adar Beis. As long as it's a defined amount of time. So whether it's 30 days or 29 days, it shouldn't matter. Amra Papa, no. Man da Amar Chodesh, Ratza Shloshim. No, but Papa says what it means is like this. The opinion that says Chodesh holds that it could either be 29 or 30 days. So Rebbe would hold that because Adar Aleph can be either 29 or 30 days, therefore what? Therefore, halacha l'maisa, you have to send out shluchim again for Adar Sheni. Because remember, understand what the Havamina is. The Havamina is that the leap month is always Adar Aleph. And at first we thought that halacha l'maisa, there was a machlokes, is Adar Aleph always 29 days or 30 days? Either way, the Gemara says you shouldn't have to send out shluchim for Adar Beis. Why? Because if Adar Aleph is always a defined amount of time, Adar Beis will always come either 30 or 31 days later. To which the Gemara says no. The opinion that says Chodesh, Rav Shimon says Chodesh means that sometimes Adar Aleph could be 30 days, sometimes it could be 29 days, because we're not sure, because it depends on the year. Halacha l'maisa, you send out shluchim for Adar Beis. So again, Rebbe holds you send out shluchim for Adar Beis. Our Mishnah doesn't include that. We'll continue that Ma'achol Rabosai Mir Hashem tomorrow. But now Baruch Hashem, we've caught up with the Daf Yomi cycle. Shkach Rabosai, incredible day.
No fasting, right?
Sorry?
No fasting, we caught up.
No fasting, huh? For sure.